Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next in our series of roundtable events about LED technology and the client experience. We're very excited today about the topic we're going to discuss, LED design and implementation, the impact of green technology. Before I start, I want to cover some of the basics for our call today. We welcome your questions and we'll address them throughout the roundtable. Please post those in the Q&A section of the Zoom window. That way, all of our guests will be able to see those questions and we'll be able to answer them as we go along. As we begin, please comment in the chat section in the Zoom and tell us where you're joining from today. For myself, hi, I'm in Houston, Texas, where I live. The purpose of today's call is to discuss the impact of green technologies on your LED designs. We're addressing two specific vertical markets today: the retail customer space and the enterprise corporate space. We had a third guest planned to work with us who had to drop out at the last minute. And that customer was from the theme park business. And we were really excited to have that conversation with them because the theme park business is very focused on sustainable designs. We'll just have to fill in the time with our two guests that are with us today. Before I introduce them, I just wanted to tell a little bit about Absen's Green program. Absen Green was a program formed at the end of last year. Our company has spent a lot of time and creativity in developing a manufacturing process that's as efficient as possible. All of the products that are produced within Absen's intelligent manufacturing program, they meet the new European RoHS 2.0 directive. This is a harmful substances directive. Things like lead, mercury, cadmium. There's a total of 10 substances in there that have to be restricted. And we meet or exceed the standards for all of those with the promotion of human health and environmental protection. We also meet the ISO 50001 energy management certification. We implemented a conservation and emissions reduction program in 4 different areas. First, our product design, our process innovation, supply chain management, a base of our operations. As a result of this, the program has been successful to the point where we've been able to decrease our energy consumption by 17.8% per product manufactured. So we're saving almost 18% in energy consumption during the manufacturing process. This savings carries over from the manufacturing process to the operational efficiency side of our product as well. Just one example would be our outdoor product, the A series. It's a 10,000 nit product. Again, it's intended for outdoor, weatherproof. And its standard power on state, it has a consumption average of about 250 watts per meter squared. The industry average for others in the 10,000 nit category is between 600 and 800 watts per meter squared, a substantial savings with the Absen product. So not only are we consuming less power in the manufacturing of the product, but our customers are saving money and lowering their carbon footprint once they deploy our products. The Absen Green program is what we've created to promote this sustainability in our products. So let's dive into the discussion. To our guests, thank you for being here today. I appreciate your joining our discussion. I'll introduce each of you. Please tell us about yourselves, what you do, and where you are. Ben, let's start with you.
Great. So, hi, everybody. My name's Ben Phelps. I'm based in the north of Spain. I'm originally from the UK, as you could probably guess from my accent, but I've been living in Spain for 15 years now. I've been in the AV industry for all of that time, 15 years, but I originally studied architecture. And I was just thinking that 20 years ago that I left university, and sustainability was a big issue 20 years ago when I was studying at university. And obviously it continues to still be today, and we've made some good advancements, of course, as well. So I'm the industry director here in Absen for the retail industry. You might be thinking, well, we didn't even know Absen was involved in the retail industry, and I wouldn't be at all offended if anybody thought that. The reason being that because of confidentiality agreements that we have, we're very private. We have to be with all that we've done for retail. But the reality is that we have hundreds of retail clients and thousands of Absen LED screens in some very nice retail locations all around the world. We just can't make a song and dance about it as much as we would like to. So you won't see it on our website, you won't see it on LinkedIn, you won't see it on social media or anywhere. But if anybody privately would like to reach out to me or to Fred, then we can discuss probably that in a bit more depth. I think it's fair to say that in Absen, we are one of, if not the number one, LED manufacturer for the retail industry. Just as I said before, not many people know that. So it's a real pleasure to be with you all this afternoon, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Great, thanks, Ben. Next, we have Scott Simpson. Scott?
Thanks, Fred. Yeah, my name is Scott Simpson. I'm from PAE Consulting Engineers in Portland, Oregon. And the Luma you see here is here. Luma is our lighting group, and we also do some AV through Luma with executive briefing centers and experiential design. But my background has been, I've been in AV for about 25 years, and I have always been passionate about sustainability, which is one of the things that brought me to PAE 3.5 years ago. PAE is at the forefront of tackling the planet's energy and water challenges. We work a lot with utilities and a lot with water systems, but one of our biggest things is really pushing the envelope, no pun intended, for green building, particularly living buildings. I'm actually calling you now from our latest, the world's largest living building here in Portland, Oregon, the PAE Living Building. And then our Seattle office is the Bullitt Center. But clients come to us for sustainability solutions, and that includes technology and AV.
Great. Yeah, I mean, anybody who wants to learn more about living buildings, reach out to Scott. He can tell you about their facility. It's world class. So let's start with you, Ben, and talk a little bit about the retail sector. When you're working with a retail customer, what are their most important considerations in making a decision? You know, is it image quality? Is it price? Is it power consumption? Some kind of cost of ownership? What's the most important to them?
Yeah, it's a tough first question, but it's a nice one. The reality of retail is that every single retailer is a different world. And the more time I spend in the retail industry, the more that's true. And sometimes you get quite surprising results from it. So before, I probably should have mentioned in the introduction, I spent 10 years working for what has become Europe's biggest systems integrator. And during that time, I had the privilege of being heavily involved in the rollout of LED for one of the world's largest fashion retailers, let's say, without saying any names because we can't, but you might get the idea. And they have thousands of stores with LED. And so I was involved from the architects making the very first decision to use LED, and I've kind of watched that process. And we work with other retailers as well. And as I just said, I think the reality is every retailer is a different world, and it's about understanding them as a company themselves. So there are a few leaders, as in every industry, and 95% of the other companies are followers. So it's interesting to watch what the leaders have done, because they've been kind of pioneers really in using LED. Nobody else was before that. So together we made a lot of mistakes along the way. But the reality is that if we're talking what's the key decision? Well, budget is the first one, of course. That goes without saying, really. And secondly, pixel pitch over the years it has dropped a lot, but it's still an important question. And then the next question is, how are we going to get content on the screen? And the earlier that question comes up, the better. But in general, that they tend to be the biggest issues. And then with international retail, logistics, because what you don't want, and what some retailers have done in the past, is create for themselves a monster whereby they've got a different integrator in every city in the world, and nobody is actually keeping an eye on which manufacturer and which screen is used in each location. And they end up creating a bit of a mess with themselves. And that's hard to rectify. And what that does is it gives LED as part of the package. It gives it almost a bad reputation, because people's fingers have been burned along the way. And then suddenly, because nobody was overseeing the whole rollout, then they've got different resolutions, different manufacturers, different screen qualities in different places, and there are lots of hidden costs involved when that happens as well. So for me, one of the biggest challenges is there somebody behind this, maybe in a senior position? And bit by bit, the major retailers are putting somebody, even an AV person, in that position, and it's much easier when that's the case. But if this is led by purchasing, or if it's led by marketing, or if it's led by the architects and designers, then it can be difficult to kind of unravel really where the main issues are coming from. So it's about listening to each retailer. That was a long answer for that question, sorry, but because there's a lot involved.
Yeah. So how often does green come up in those conversations?
Okay, so I'm going to be honest, and not all that much, but it depends on each country. So I about 2 months ago, I did a tour in Germany with our local team there, and it came up in every single conversation during that week, actually. But before that, it hadn't so much. And that was because there was a major German retailer in the background to all of those conversations, let's say, that everyone was more or less involved with, that had reached out and was actually on a bit of a green campaign. So again, it depends on each retailer as well. What I've noticed in the last couple of years, in general, of course, retailers are becoming more and more concerned with sustainability, and not just sustainability, with carbon footprint and with sourcing, and where do their materials come from, and they're under a lot of pressure to do that as well. We won't name names, but we know that even where the let's say in the case of fashion, where the clothing is coming from, where the cotton is coming from, without wishing to go any further, but you get the idea that they're all concerned with that. So actually it is coming up, and it's coming up not normally in the first conversation with a retailer that's exploring AV for the first time, because they've probably got other concerns and they've probably got other issues that they need to get to first, whether or not we think it's right, but that's generally what happens. But those that maybe have a history of using AV, and it forms a big part of what they're doing already as a rollout around the world, then I've noticed a couple of customers that we've got really starting to question and really starting to ask information from us, and really asking for advice, or taking the initiative and maybe studying, for example, the consumption of screens or whatever it might be in different places. So it's more and more it's becoming an issue, which is a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very good, in the US, I think that we're a little bit behind the 8 ball with particularly Northern Europe, the Scandinavian countries and things. Before I ask the next question, let's launch the first poll question. Just from a sustainability standpoint, Jason, who is monitoring our call today, Jason, if you'll launch that first poll question. Here we go. We'll give you 20 seconds or so to give us an answer, and then we'll move on. And let me ask the question, Ben, while people are answering the poll. When your customers do want to talk about green, are they talking about power consumption, heat loads, or are they going so far as to worry, like you said, the materials and the clothing and things there from a technology standpoint?
Again, without wishing to be boring like an old broken record, but each retailer is different. But there are those that are doing a lot of due diligence, and again, that for a company like Absen, that's a positive thing, because we're not afraid or shy of that when that happens. So we've had a major international luxury retailer accompany us, some executives accompany us to China to do their due diligence on the factory. And so that, of course, forms part of the sustainability as well, because when you see that the factory, as you mentioned in your introduction, with the ROHS certification and the ISO certifications that we've got, and when you see a nice clean factory with happy workers, and maybe it sounds a bit cheesy to say it, but it's true when you visit that factory, and I've visited a lot of factories in China over the years as well, and none of them are comparable, really. Oh, sorry, we're getting a lot of popping from my microphone apparently, so let me move it a little bit further away. Okay, fine.
So let me give some results here. 54% of our guests do not have a green program in their company. That's surprising. So Ben, recently you told me about a customer of yours that's a large global retailer that did a review of their global energy consumption footprint. Tell us more about that review and the results they found.
Yeah, that was a big lesson, I would say, a big lesson for all of us. So this is a company with thousands of LED screens, and from the very beginning, they understood that each location was different and they should treat the screens in a slightly different way. Fine. Our indoor models are normally around about 700 to 800 nits, for example, in terms of brightness, and there are locations where that's necessary, but the majority of indoor locations you can certainly lower that brightness to make it maybe more comfortable for the people that are watching, or to not draw attention away from the product, which always needs to be the star. So they've been putting their screens at 70% brightness over the last 10 years in most of the locations. Fine. So that automatically reduces the consumption of the screens. But not only that, in the last couple of months, really, this has happened. They're on this, let's say, campaign to lower that even more. And the people that are in charge of that initiative within the company are visiting flagship stores and making decisions as they go along with designers as well. And what they found is they can reduce the brightness of their screens to 30 to 35% in quite a number of locations, maybe stores that are a bit deeper and there's not so much natural light getting in. And again, they don't want to draw attention away from the products. Well, they could do that. Well, if you can lower the brightness of your screen to 30 or 35%, then there are big advantages to that. First of all, the obvious one is that the cost of ownership, the fact that the consumption of the screen is much lower. The cost of, I don't know in the US, but in Europe, that the cost of electricity has gone through the roof in the last couple of months. So it's allowed them to be able to kind of adjust to that. But not only that, what they're also doing is extending the lifespan of the screen. With LED, we always say, well, a good LED, like an Absen LED, 100,000 hour lifespan. But the reality is that 100,000 hour is when the screen's on 24 hours a day, on full brightness, and with white color as well. And that's up to 50% of its original brightness. But those aren't real conditions in the real world. The real world is, well, you've got a video on the screen, so it's naturally changing all the time as well. And as I've just mentioned, you can turn the brightness right down. So that's extending the lifespan considerably. What does that mean? Well, it means the screens will still look good 10, 15 years down the line. And that's an incredibly important part of any kind of sustainability plan that a company might have. I think later we could talk maybe a bit more about other consequences of that as well. But that for me was surprising that they were able to do that. And I think the lesson is that if this is, even if it's a headquarter driven thing, this rollout of LED, it's good in each location to adapt the screen to the needs of each spot as well.
Yeah, it's interesting as we educate our customers about the life cycle of the product. That 100,000 hour number is definitely something that gets extended when we're not using full power. So that's an interesting result that they realize that. So, I don't have a lot of experience in the retail space, but what I do see when I go out into the retail space is the screens never get turned off. You drive by the local mall here, and I've got the mall's been closed for hours, and all the screens are still on. So, is it difficult to educate your customers about the impact on sustainability and green initiatives of this, what's really overuse?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds simple, but there must be normally reasons behind that kind of decision. So maybe it could be the integrator not taking advantage of the fact that either remotely or you can program the screens to go to black at any point. That's an easy thing to set up. So a lot of our customers, well, they want the screen to turn on an hour before the store opens, and they want the screen to turn off an hour after it closes. That's fine. That's one way to deal with that. And I think the other what happens sometimes is that the company that has installed the screen isn't necessarily the company that's in charge of the content or the content management of that screen either. So it could be that even when the screen was installed, the decision wasn't made yet on who was going to be doing that. So maybe the easiest thing for the retailer was to say, well, we'll leave it on, and then we're never going to have any issues with that. And I think probably that's the education, we could say, that we can maybe assist with as well, that those kind of early decisions that need to be made in a project, such as something so simple as when the screen turns on and turns off. You're right, Fred, it's common here as well. I've seen that quite often.
Well, I remember when I was a system integrator, our corporate customers would always say, well, we can't have the projectors accidentally be left on. And so I want you to send a command to every projector in the building at midnight to turn off. And then you'd have an executive who's there in a meeting talking to China or India or somewhere where he's in the office at 11 o'clock at night and the power turns off on his projector. And next thing you know, you get asked to go out and take that feature away. So it has to be done correctly. And I think that we would do great as a steward of green technology and the Absen Green Initiative if we could educate our customers on the value of just simply turning it off when it doesn't need to be turned on.
Yeah.
So, you know, uptime's critical, right? I mean, you don't want your customer walking in the flagship store and have half your screens down. You know, not only for you know, the whole ecosystem, so the hardware and the software, everything. You know, are you seeing clients requesting more information about monitoring their video walls?
Absolutely. And the bigger the rollout, the more need there is to do that. And there are some clever things that you can do with LED as well, just on a practical level. What's quite nice with LED is you can use a Cat6 data cable from the screen, and you can locate all of the control equipment 100 meters away in a nice communication rack, which is so much easier when you're doing kind of phase one diagnostics on a problem, because from HQ you can call the person working in the store and you can ask them to go to the communications rack and check what's happening, because quite often the issue is that the PC or the player has an issue, not the screen itself. So I think there are things there. And also with a few of the series that we've got, and I must say, I think it's worth saying, we have got products that were designed specifically for the needs of retail that we developed over the years. It's evolved listening from the needs of retailers and integrators involved in retail. And one of the functions that a few of our series have is the ability to remotely access and remotely control the screen. So yes, there are things you can do like adjust the brightness of the screen remotely, fine, that's great. But also you could diagnose certain issues on that, or you could be ahead of the game as well. You could receive maybe a notification that you need to go there because a power supply is out, and that kind of helps your relationship there. How that links back to sustainability, I would say, is what we're doing by doing that, we are again prolonging the life of the screen, and that's really important. It's really important that the screen looks good from day one up until the refurb of the store, or up until the decision is made to move the screen to another location. And I'm seeing more and more retailers concerned about that as well.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. You know, we worked on a large project here in the United States for an automotive company, and we worked very closely with a software development firm that was supplying the monitoring application to the customer. And we actually wrote some custom scripts and custom program for them to monitor things like temperature in the power supplies, fan speeds, things like that. And so that's all available. It's just a matter of again, educating the customer of what's out there. And I really think that the AV as a service, you know, that the one thing that the hybrid workspace has done for us is it's created environments where AV companies, AV systems integrators have begun to offer AV as a service. So it's, you never buy the equipment, you pay us a monthly fee, we'll guarantee your LED and the lobby works. And that's, you know, something we're seeing more and more of. And those customers, meaning the end users who are buying AV as a service from the systems integrators, are demanding that they have 100% uptime. So monitoring is more and more important. So I want to switch over to Scott for some questions, but before we do that, let's launch the second poll question, please, James, or Jason, I'm sorry. So, you know, do you promote the environmental factors in the calculation of a return on investment, things like heat load, power consumption, infrastructure requirements, et cetera? Let's just see, where are you talking to your customers about these sorts of things? So let's move on a little bit. Scott, let me start with you by basically asking the same question I asked Ben first. You know, when you're working with a large enterprise client, what's the most important consideration for them in making a decision?
Well, that changes depending on the client, definitely, but more and more of our larger corporate clients, particularly in California and our Silicon Valley clients, sustainability is really important. They a number of them have put together net zero plans, carbon neutral or carbon negative by 2030, 2025. Very Facebook, for instance, has just started a solar boom in South Georgia just because of their data centers there. So there's a lot of movement from a lot of corporate clients that really want to move this along. And so we have to adhere to those requirements, but it's a passion for us too. And so a lot of our clients will come to us to help them with strategies, and and AV is an important part of that. And so it is we always have to, of course, image quality is important, aesthetics of the installation, how it's architecturally integrated. But we always have to look at it through the filter of the sustainability pledges that the company has made and what their goals are.
Yeah, I think that, one of the things that I work very hard to educate my customers on is that, you've got to have C-suite buy-in. You need, those are the guys that are controlling the budgets. And if you can align your LED project with their sustainability requirements globally, then, or the entire project, not just the LED, but the entire project. So let me give you some results here. It looks like 73% of respondents do talk about things like cost of ownership in their return on investment discussions. We've got 9% said they don't know how to talk about it. So if you don't know how to talk about return on investment and you'd like to get some input, please reach out to me after the call at some point. You can reach me on my Absen email, or actually, if we could, Jason, if we could post the LinkedIn profiles of Ben, Scott, and myself in the chat section while we go on, that would be great. That'd give everybody our context. So Ben made an important point earlier when he was talking about the retail environment, about content. I know that content's often an afterthought. We did a roundtable. Our last roundtable was exclusively discussing content, and we learned
it should not be.
Yeah, absolutely should not be. I agree. So you've got some interesting things to talk about, content and projects that you've done. Is it important to get those content creators in the discussion and how it relates to power consumption, cooling requirements, things like that?
It does. Now, I think that far too often, as you said, clients will have the idea that they want a video wall. They want a huge video wall, and then say, I'm not sure what's on it, but I want to wow my visitors. And then they'll come after the fact, after the form factor will be there before the content creators come in. And unfortunately, that really kind of ties the hands of those that are creating the content, creating the experience. And that experience is really important. And so it's good to have all the players understand the importance of both the experience and the technology and the form factor. But sustainability needs to be a part of that, because we're talking about hundreds of kilowatts of power. And when we look at some of these installations, like for instance, there's an airport client that we're doing a project for, and we're saving them over $40,000 a year just by our strategy. And I'll tell you a little bit about that strategy real quick, if you don't mind if I share screen here. So what we're doing here with this client is that, let me know if you can see this.
Yep, I got it.
Okay. So if you look here, we actually quantified and measured exactly what the power consumption is based upon the color value. And then after we did this, we actually looked at combinations, brightness, a number of different factors, but this kind of just gives you an idea of the impact of choosing colors. For instance, black is around 10 to 13%. Of course, white, as we all know, is 100%. But it varies quite a bit. So what we're doing for this client is that they have they want to go for LEED Platinum. They have really stringent sustainability goals. So what we're doing is we're working with the building management system, the content management system. We'll poll the building management system, and based upon demand, we'll actually call up content that's less impactful. So if it's during peak high demand hours, it'll actually have content, bring up content that's more greens and blues, and then open up a little bit when there's more power budget that it can work with. And so this allows us both to save a ton of money, but then a ton of power, and stay within the client's sustainability goals.
Yeah, that's interesting. We don't often think of content's impact on consumption, but this would be a terrific thing for you to increase your credibility as a systems integrator, to go back into your clients and say, your corporate logo has got a lot of white in it. That's going to create an environment where you're using more and more power to drive this.
And it's just a conversation, and it's just good for your client, good for you to communicate that to your client, because we are talking about long term. The one thing that we love about LEDs is you don't have to replace them as often. They're resilient. They last longer, but at the same time, we have to tell the clients, hey, look, if you're going to just display all white, then you're going to have a lower return on investment.
Right. Yeah, it's something in our last roundtable where we had the content discussion, something that Steve Dietz, who's from 900 pounds in Dallas, Texas, brought up is, one of the things I had never thought of until we had this discussion is color blindness. When you're creating content, who's your audience? Well, there's a likelihood that whatever X percentage of people in the country that you're in are colorblind. Those people aren't going to see the content the same way, and so you've got to take those colorblind flips. What is it, red, green, or blue, whatever it is? I'm not sure. It's funny, in my household, I told this story in our last roundtable. I'm the only one of my brothers who isn't colorblind at all. I have one brother who's totally colorblind, and another who's only one of the two. And so when I was a kid, they would come to me and say, hey, do these socks match? Because I can't tell. And I would always say, yep, even when they didn't. But that's just what little brothers do. You're talking about a little bit about your discussions with your clients about meeting their global goals for green initiatives and things like that. Are they asking you about the manufacturers? Are they asking about manufacturing processes and materials used and things like that?
On some projects, for instance, with the Living Building Challenge, which is the most stringent of green building certifications. And I'm actually in a living building right now here in Portland, our living building, the PAE living building. It's the largest in the world. And in building this building, we had to vet every ingredient going in every device and every product that went in this building. So it's called the Red List. And we have to ensure that everything that goes in this building is red list free. And clients had started asking for this. I had quite a few clients in Canada, for instance, years ago, who wanted no PVC in cabling because they're concerned about off gas, and then if heat would cause dissipation of toxins, and they just did not want anything to do with PVC. So we actually had to import from Europe our cabling. Luckily, we have far more choices now. That was about 10 years ago. We have far more choices now, and in our building now we have no PVC whatsoever in any of our cabling. And so you do have clients that are concerned with that. They are concerned with toxins in their building. They're concerned with as things heat up, what's released. And so give peace of mind, but then also to align with some of these certifications. More and more clients are asking for, more information on what the toxicity is of what we're putting in our buildings.
Yeah, Absen has a wonderful document on a standardization of LED, and we wrote the document. I know this because of its introduction. It describes why we wrote it. We wrote it because there's so many new LED manufacturers that are joining the business, that standards, some high quality, some not, some trying to be competitive, don't have good support infrastructure and things like that. And so we wrote this terrific document, and which I can certainly share with anyone who's interested in seeing it. We're now developing a document, a standards document for our green initiative. So we'll actually have an industry standard document for our green program. So that's something that'll be available soon. Our marketing team and Doris is working on it. Yeah. So we're getting a couple of questions from the audience I want to throw out there now. The first of them, it has to do with LEED, obviously. Are we, continuing to see LEED standards requirements in our doc? I think the answer to that's yes. From what you've been hearing so far, we're definitely having LEED discussions all the time. I remember when LEED first was big, everybody thought, well, we'll put some of the power management stuff in for the AV systems, and that'll give us some LEED points. And it never really amounted to a high number, but with LED, you can certainly get a lot of LEED standards. Now, there's another one here, Scott. I'll have to ask you what this is. It says, additionally, it says, what about WELL standards, WELL standards in projects? What are WELL standards? I've not heard of that.
WELL standards, that's another certification, and it's another building certification that focuses a lot on the health and well-being of the tenants, as well as sustainability. But WELL has a lot to do with healthier spaces and healthier communities, and it's a great certification that we have to adhere to quite a bit in our projects as well.
Yeah, I think the human factor, I was going to talk about that a little bit later, but the human factor is a really important part of design, I think. So here's another question that we just recently got in. See, my mouse is giving me trouble today. It says, does that include the use of LSZH, low smoke, zero halogen cabling in our projects?
Yes.
Oh, I see you answered already. There you go. Yeah,
that is true. In our living building, there's a UL listing for that, and we had adhered to that as well. In fact, you can look up the Living Building Challenge and look at the red list, and it's pretty extensive. And in fact, with the project, with any of the living building projects, the builder will actually have a member of the staff that his or her sole purpose is to vet product and make sure that none of these toxins or harmful materials are in any of the products.
Great. So let's take that same question about your customers asking you about the manufacturing process, and let's flip that around to the integrated. Are they asking you about your integrators? Here's my short list that you're recommending. Are they asking which ones of these meet our global green initiatives?
Usually not that often, because normally when we get to a point where, clients that are really concerned with green building often will have, yes, they will ask for our recommendations, but often they will either have internal AV teams or have partnerships with integrators. However, clients that are going for just LEED Gold, LEED Platinum, if we're talking about that, then yes, we will be asked to look for integrators that align with the vision there. But it doesn't come up. It doesn't come as often as I would like. And I think that far too often, far too many people are still in the bid build process. And I think design build is starting to really gain a lot of momentum. And I think it's a good thing, because I think it's really strategic partnerships are important in this endeavor. People that get it, people that get what you're trying to do. And so I think that, the days of just sending something out for bid and thinking that every AV integrator is apples to apples to apples is just not the case.
Yeah, I think, since I work exclusively with the consulting community, I think that, as you travel around the country, integrators have, challenges occasionally, but I think that this is a great industry filled with great people. And, part of what we're trying to do with these roundtables is to just tell the community what we're thinking about. We're thinking about green initiatives. We're thinking about content. We're thinking about how to help you understand how to design an LED wall and how to specify it for your own projects. And that's something that's really important to us. And so at Absen here, the team, we're really trying to get to the education factor ramped up for our systems integrators and for our consultant partners. So it's really, some of these questions I've been asking about content and power, and are we having those discussions with our clients, and do you feel comfortable discussing return on investment? All of those are intended to educate our system integrators and our consultant partners, because people like to do business with people that teach them something. And if we're sitting across the table from our client and we're able to ask them questions that make them think, then that usually means that you can develop a great relationship with them. So, okay, let's launch poll question number 3. Jason, if you don't mind, please, if you'd launch number 3, we'll throw that out there. And then I'd like to talk a little bit about sustainability. And, so question number 3 is, do the sustainability initiatives of your suppliers impact your decision to select them? So, again, this is about us, the manufacturers. Are you making a decision based on the green initiatives of the folks you're buying product from? And we'll let people answer that as we keep talking. So a little bit about sustainability. Now, when we started to put this program together, we started to have discussions about some of the things that we do as a manufacturer. A lot of them are on the manufacturing side, right? We're not using tin, we're not using cadmium, we're not using some of these bad chemicals. We have a efficient process. And one of our team members had a great comment that he added to that discussion. Christian, who, if you've seen our roundtables previously, has been a guest often, brought up the fact that we ship LEDs in wooden crates. And the crates are heavy and they have a large carbon footprint when you ship them. If you're flying them by air, they also have to be, what do you do with them when you're done? So we don't have a recycling program for the packing materials that ends up on site with the LED wall. And that's something that everyone took note of in the meeting that we had. And I think that's something that we need to do, definitely. So, okay, so let's talk about the poll results here just for a second. We've got an interesting response that 75% of people responded, said that they take the sustainability initiatives of their suppliers into consideration occasionally. Only 13% have said all the time, and 13% have also said that price is what drives their selection, which we all know is a reality. But
I'll agree with that, because to be honest with you, there's projects where we'll not use low smoke zero halogen cable because of the cost, and it's just the client just does not have those sustainability goals, but cost is more of a factor, and we have to actually still work within the boundaries we have, but most of our clients are still going after some type of a sustainability goal. And whether it's reduction on power consumption, whether it's, which also factors in cost, things like that. But there's a number of different strategies we can go, and none of them check off all of the boxes, right?
Right, right. You know, it's like when you want to buy a car, right? We all want to drive a Ferrari, but we all have to pay for it eventually, right? So you end up in a Chevy or something. I don't know what it is on the street that I live on, but for some reason there's like 12 new cars on the street. It's like all of a sudden, I guess Houston got a shipment of cars from somebody. We used to driving by car dealerships, and down here, and the lots are empty because there's no cars. You know, the recycling thing I brought up with the cartons and the shipping materials and things like that, you know, it's difficult to talk about recycling in LED because it's, you know, what do you do with an LED block once you're ready to get rid of it? You know, it's kind of like the lamp from a projector, right? If you want to environmentally, you know, properly dispose of a projector lamp, you know, there are companies out there that'll do it, but they're fewer. Well, there's fewer lamps and projectors too, but you know, some of the other things like the frames and the cabinets, you know, that's all aluminum. That stuff can be recycled. So, you know, I'll throw these questions out to both of you just because you've got such different customers. But, you know, are your customers repurposing their walls? You mentioned it previously, Ben, that maybe, you know, since that life cycle is so much longer, it's being extended by reusing it somewhere else, or, you know, or what are they doing with the product when they're decommissioning it?
Yeah, that's, I mean, not everyone's doing this. I think the vast majority of retailers, probably first of all, when they first plan a store and put screens in, they expect the screen to be in for 3 or 4 years, and it ends up being in there a fair bit longer, which is probably a good thing because of the lifespan of LED. But the company I was mentioning to you on previous conversations, what they do is, let's say in first world or in developed nations, they install an LED screen. If they've got the settings of the screen correctly, as we mentioned before, then there's no reason why that screen, the lifespan of that screen, isn't extremely long. I mean, with literally 15-year lifespan on that screen. So why not, as they do on a refurb after 4 years, take that screen out and ship it to a store that's opening maybe in a developing nation. Now, it's a little bit counterintuitive for an LED manufacturer to encourage clients to do that, but I think if we're talking sustainability, we need to be serious about that kind of initiative as well. And I know a few are doing that, and I think that's something that we would actively encourage because of the lifespan of LED. Think about how you can reuse screens, and why not invest in that? We know that pixel pitch is dropping year by year. It's going to get to the point where it can't drop any further. But anyway, pixel pitch is dropping and dropping. So why not take advantage of that? And maybe if you've got a P4 screen from 4 years ago, or swap it out for a 2.5, but use the P4 in a developing nation. I think that's a perfectly legitimate thing to do.
Right, right. Are you, Scott, what about on your side? I mean, you know, I presume that you're working with customers that used to have projectors installed and now they're getting flat panels or LED walls. What are they doing about recycling the decommissioned hardware?
Well, here in the States, and it depends on state by state, but each state has a Department of Recycling and Environmental Recovery. Some states like California have initiatives that are more devoted to electronics. And so I think the best thing to do is look at what state you're in. European countries will also have these initiatives, and find out the best solution for safely recycling these products, because more and more we're seeing initiatives popping up that are supporting this. And the reason I know about California is there are a number of the executive briefing centers that are there. Even though the lifespan of LED is long, these corporations want to refresh their briefing centers every few years. And so with that, from time to time, they'll have to either repurpose or get rid of their direct view LEDs. So that's very few clients that can afford this, but there are out there. And so they have programs to either repurpose within their organization, or to then, you know, reach out to their officials to see the best way to recycle these products.
Yeah, I think that this is still a difficult question we don't have answers to. You know, I think that's part of where we want to go. You know, in we mentioned it earlier, the human factors. Two of the things that Absen does in our product these days is that we have a low blue light setting, and this is the protecting your eyes from long-term exposure to an LED display in terms of fatigue, eye fatigue. We basically can activate our low blue light setting. And the other thing we've got now is our EMC Class B rating, which is for electromagnetic radiation. This being a Class B rating puts us in a class where we're preventing harm to the human body by being in front of an LED wall for an extended period of time. With LEDs becoming more and more popular as a corporate display in a meeting room, conference room environment, people can be sitting in front of them all day long. If you have eye fatigue or exposure to the electromagnetic radiation, you don't want that to happen. So the one thing I'll ask, as we're obviously, we have exposure to this industry from a bunch of different perspectives, but Scott, I'll ask you first, but what advice would you give the AV industry about sustainability and green initiatives? I mean, what would you like to see this industry do?
Well, I would say I'd like for this industry to see the amount of momentum in this space, and to see that this is where a number of corporate clients, and especially educational clients, are headed. All the universities we work for have very, very stringent goals, and more this is becoming, even we actually just did the first living building in the South in Atlanta, the Candida Center at Georgia Tech. So the momentum worldwide is accelerating exponentially. So I think it comes to the point where, just look at what the future signs are telling you and prepare, because this is where all industries are headed. And just in the last few years of working here, I've been just blown away by exponentially how quickly our projects have exploded, and how more and more lofty the goals have become with the clients.
Right. I'm sorry here, my computer just did something funny.
But yeah, I will say that the AV industry, pretty much just listen to your clients, understand what they're asking for. Far too often, this will come up early and then just go by the wayside, and the clients won't get what they asked for. So I think it's a matter of giving the clients what they asked for and understanding what this is and what their goals are.
Right. I think that, from the consultant community perspective, if I'm sitting with an owner and a general contractor and I'm doing final interviews with AV integrators, and one of those integrators asks the general contractor, what's your sustainability program? Because we want to make sure that we meet it. That would go a long way to get some credibility in that general contractor. So Ben, what about you? What advice would you give?
Yeah, well, hey, the first bit of advice would be talk to Scott. But joking aside, yesterday Scott very kindly explained in depth kind of the history of the building where they're at and the work that's gone involved into the AV there. And I was really impressed with the due diligence that he did, and with the kind of selection process and the research that he did. So that included actively going out and talking to manufacturers. And I think one bit of advice would be, it's easy to say it, I know, because we've all got businesses and we all need to survive. But one bit of advice was, don't just select the product that you're going to make the most margin off of, or that you're going to make the most money from. And I know it's easy to say that, but sometimes it's better in the long term to have a chat with the manufacturers, get to know it, and select the product that's the most sustainable option or the most long-term option. And that would include, for example, and I would say specifically for LED, this is a problem, specification sheets. Understanding the specification sheets. Now they're in a way, they need to be taken with a pinch of salt in the LED industry, because I don't want to say it's easy to invent the numbers that nobody's going to check them, but there could be a little bit of that. And not only that, when a specification sheet says that an LED screen has, let's say, 500 watt per square meter power consumption, as I said before, that's a bit of information for an electrician to get the right cabling down to the screen to make sure the screen works. It's not actually a reflection of what the consumption of that screen is going to be in real life circumstances. So it is good to understand that as well, I think. And my advice from my own career, I ran an LED department for an integrator for a long time, would be when you are talking about specification sheets. I would just give you an example. If you go to ISE, you will see 1,000 LED manufacturers that more or less from the outside look like they do pretty much the same thing. And it can be very, very difficult to filter that down to the ones that are worth even considering. And one simple way of doing that is when they send your the spec sheet across and they tell you all of the certifications that the screen has, it has UL, it has ECL, it has ROHS, and it has that, ask for the laboratory report. And that will filter out 95% of them because they probably haven't photoshopped that part yet. And yet the real proper manufacturers actually have those laboratory reports that they can share. And hey, that might sound a little bit strong to say that, but that's the reality of the industry that we're in. I think project planning is a huge part of it as well. It would be a shame to put together a really nice plan for a rollout of LED and then realize, well, the store's open in a month, we need to ship it all by air, because you've pretty much carbon footprint you've pretty much destroyed by doing that. And it sounds obvious, but in retail it can be very difficult to tie a retailer down on that kind of thing. So talk to them and make a plan, hold stock perhaps. Sometimes it's better to offer stock that's in stock, has been shipped by boat and is available and is ever so slightly more expensive or a lower pixel pitch than they were looking for, but you can convince them to use that because of the offset of the carbon footprint and also the less stress that's involved as well. And finally, what we mentioned before about reusing screens, look to repurpose them. The nice thing about LED, or one of the nice things, is it's made up of small panels. So it's quite easy to take a screen that, let's say, is 10 meters by 5 meters in a location and divide it into 3 smaller screens in the lobby of a space as well. Scott was talking before about corporate spaces doing that, where you've got a giant screen in a conference room and you want to swap it out after a couple of years. That's great. Use the old one in the entrance hall and do something nice there with it. And I think that they're all things that can add up together.
Yeah, you bring up an important point. I think that with the cabinet style LED displays, like our Acclaim Plus series and our Acclaim Pro series, as well as our CL and many of our products, the cabinets are exactly the same. It's the modules you put in them that's the different pixel pitch. And so part of what I do with the consultant community is we're talking 18, 24 months out from a project. And we may be specifying a 2.5 mil pitch. But we all know that today, the 2.5 mil pitch is the smallest pixel pitch they can afford for their budget. But tomorrow, the 1.2 is going to be the same price, or in 18 months, it's going to be the same price. So it makes it really easy for the consultant to go ahead and just keep the same cabinet, change out the modules in your design, make it a 1.2. Nobody know, nothing else changes. Cabling doesn't change, power doesn't change. No, well, power may change based on pixel density, but it wouldn't change substantially. So, and I'm going to go ahead and just ask one last question. If we've got just about 2 or 3 minutes here to sum up. So if you could do it quickly. What's the most exciting thing for you out there in the marketplace, guys? For me personally, it's I've said this before. It's naked eye 3D on LED displays. I think that is just exciting. I can't wait to see those in corporate lobbies. So Scott, what do you think? What's the most exciting thing?
Well, as far as LED, that's a good one, definitely. But far more, the advances I'm seeing as far as sustainability goes is in systems integration and how we're starting to break down these silos. And more often we can pull data from any number of systems and the monitoring of, through the cloud and through cloud integration, where all of this data can go to a data lake in the cloud, and we can use AI to find efficiencies. So You know, we can, for instance, by having your LED wall, providing data that also is in line with the BMS and occupant data, then we can, based upon occupancy, shut those down. We can turn those off based upon occupancy, but based upon predictive analytics, just by getting all of this data and going, you know what, Benjamin is never doing his presentation at this time, in this location, nobody else is there, we're going to go ahead and shut it down. So taking all of those factors in and finding more and more efficiencies using AI is going to be huge.
Yeah,
and I think also through comfort and ease of use as well.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Ben, what do you think real quick?
Yeah, chip on board, LED, COB, especially the flip chip. Well, it is flip chip, because more than anything, it's in its infancy and it had teething problems, but we've seemed to have overcome that. Our latest generation of chip on board is incredible. I've seen it with my own eyes and it's incredible, and it's tough, which is really important in a lot of environments. And not only that, the power consumption is 30–40% lower than equivalent non-COB models. And that for me is probably the future of LED.
Yeah, I agree.
Fred, I'll agree with that. I've seen power consumption plummet through first common cathode, then for, you know, more and more strategies. And I think that I'm ready, you know, now we're at a point where, you know, when we're designing this building here, we could only do Energy Star rated LCD. Now we're at a point where we can actually put LED in, and I'm looking forward to that happening.
Yeah, I think that'd be nice. Well, let's sum up today. Thank you, guests, Ben and Scott. I appreciate your time today. There's some terrific information shared, and I think a great discussion. I'd like to thank everyone who attended. There were a couple of folks that asked some questions about getting some documentation or some information from us. Please DM us on LinkedIn with those requests for documents. And there was a specific question for you, Scott, about sharing some information about California recycling programs. So
yeah, absolutely. And then please. Also there's some private contractors that has helped some of our clients as well, and I'll send some of that information on.
Terrific. All right, guys, thanks again. Look forward to the next roundtable that'll be coming up here in the next couple of months. So have a great day. And again, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.